Let's get you more reaction to President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet reshuffle. Cosatu says it appreciates the consultation process involving alliance partners ahead of the changes made by the president. In fact, the Trade Union Federation has placed a lot of focus on Ministers of Electricity, Intelligence and of Transport. Let's get you more on this now. We're joined by Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, Matthew Parks, joins us via our video link this morning. Matthew, good morning. All in all, it's not the kind of sort of decisive and exciting overhaul we were hoping for. What does Cosatu make of it?
Well, look, I think from our side as Cosatu, when we do appreciate the President did engage consultatively with us. We made proposals to him, some of which he accepted. Other parts he convinced us about the need for them. But I don't think you would ever find a huge overhaul of a cabinet 12 months before an election, because that will create quite a bit of stability. It takes time for any worker, let alone a minister, to get to grips with what exactly is their job about. I think for us it's about filling the critical vacancies, which was transport, which is key to rebuilding our metro rail network, public transport for ticket workers and the goods to the destinations on time safely. It's about filling the public service vacancy. That's really critical for the state to rebuild its relationship, which has been severely damaged between the state as an employer and between public servants, nurses and teachers, police officers who feel quite aggrieved by their work conditions. It is about filling the issue of, some of the other critical vacancies, which we felt were not vacancies rather, but we felt were quite weak links in the state. We've witnessed a real deterioration of local government over the past decade, where about now 90% of municipalities are in severe financial distress. Many are struggling to provide basic services. About 20 in 4 provinces can't even pay their municipal employees on time. So I think for us it's really about filling the critical vacancies. And of course also kind of saying where do we need to have some urgent interventions. We didn't expect an overhaul. But having said that, and whilst wishing these new ministers well, we are disappointed that the president didn't grab the opportunity to reduce some of the positions. We don't need to have so many deputy ministers, for example, but one understands that overhaul of cabinet actually will be done after elections. We have the political space, you have a new list for parliament, etc. Then you will have to decisively reduce it. But for us, I think the critical thing is let's see these ministers get working. We don't have the luxury of time. They need to hit the ground running. We hope not to hear scandals. So we're quite pleased to have, or to wish the new ministers of tourism and sports, arts and culture well, because we've seen some of these portfolios really dragged into unnecessary distractions over the past year, and we really need to see some decisive action from the ministers.
Yeah, I mean, there are several questions, follow-up questions that come from what you've just said, Matthew. For one, the changes to portfolios, for example, Patricia de Lille swapping with, or not swapping with Sihle Zikalala, but Patricia de Lille now goes from Public Works to tourism, right? Sihle Zikalala comes in as a new Minister of Public Works and Administration. He's new to that ministry, new as a minister as well. How much work is being done by the ministers themselves if we can swap ministers at a whim? I don't want to say willy-nilly, but how can it be so easy to just change portfolios?
Yeah, so I think one thing the president's done well is to avoid what his predecessor used to do all the time, which was to reshuffle ministers left, right and centre. In the previous administrations, you found ministers had a lifespan in their portfolio of about 8 months. And of course, in 8 months, you're not going to be able to make much impact. You'll still struggle to find out where exactly is the parking bay, etc. It takes time for any person to understand the job properly, at least a year, 2 years, etc. That's why you didn't want to do a huge overhaul now, but just to fill the key vacancies. But look, Patricia de Lille has been around for quite some time as a Minister of Public Works, as a Mayor of Cape Town, and so forth. So she's got experience. She's been in Parliament since 1994. So I think obviously she can help to focus tourism on what it should be, which is about attracting tourists and not wasting money on silly self-enrichment schemes that we saw over the past 2 months in tourism. Sihle Zikalala, again, has got significant experience. He's been a Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, has been an MEC there. And I think he also brings, if we're talking about a generational shift, then he's part of that generational shift from those who are in the 60s and 70s years of age to those who will be in the 50s and 40s and so forth. So I think we'd want to see his passion coming to public works, which is really key if we look at growing this economy. The budget of February set aside 900 billion rand to invest in public infrastructure over the next 3 years. That's key to electricity, to transport, to roads, to water, to housing, to student accommodation, agriculture, etc. That's very key to growing the economy. So we really would want to hope the Minister Zigilala will be able to find his feet very quickly. We think he has got the capacity to do so and to get that infrastructure program rolled out, because we've been quite worried at how slow it's been taking to get off the ground.
Shall we talk about the issue of the 2 deputy ministers in both in cooperative governance and in water and sanitation, Matthew? Is that also something that is needed? We're always talking about the kind of money we are spending on these portfolios. We're talking always about the president's or government's bloated cabinet. Do we need 2 deputy ministers?
No, we don't. In fact, I think combined, I was just doing a new headcount check, but before this reshuffle, we had about 34 deputy ministers. The president had previously reduced the amount of ministers in cabinet before from 34 to about 28. I think is now back to about 30. You don't need so many deputy ministers. Many of these deputy ministers struggle to find what exactly are they meant to do, because the constitution is silent on their powers, etc. They don't even have the ability to speak in the National Assembly on behalf of the portfolio. So it really it's a bit of a job creation project, if you're honest. There are some portfolios which do require deputy ministers, like Treasury, International Relations and Cooperation, Trade Industry, given the huge amount of work those portfolios do, but also that, for example, with international relations, a lot of traveling overseas by the nature of the job, etc. You could have, say, for example, 5, 10 deputy ministers. That's fine, because you invest in the next generation, you build a bit of succession planning, but you don't need a mini rally of deputy ministers. So we would really hope in the next administration to see that being slashed significantly, because, if you're telling nurses and doctors and teachers and police officers, cleaners to tighten their belts, which there's no space to be honest to be tightened in their parts, then we can afford to reduce what we spend on the executive. And honestly, it's about a symbolic message to the public that government gets the fiscal crisis, it gets the pain the public is experiencing, and it'll lead by example.
Matthew Parks, thanks very much for that analysis. Matthew Parks is Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, as we continue to unpack the changes announced to the Cabinet announced by the President last night.